did not get very far into it, and all of it leads us into the actual proceedings themselves in chapter 26. I thought we'd just take everything in from chapter 25, verse 23 going on, and get ourselves back in the flow of that before getting into 26. So on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Then at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, "King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death. And as he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him. But I have nothing definite to write to my Lord about him. Therefore I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him." So we talked about this first one being the audience hall there. Again, we didn't get a chance for much discussion on this section, but the reason why I put that in there was just to help you recognize the extent of the pomp that is being given here. It's interesting, by the way, that is the only time the Bible uses the word pomp. But it tells you something about what Festus is trying to accomplish there. So, of course, Agrippa and Bernice enter first. They're coming in with the military men, the civic leaders, the high officials, and you have to realize everybody would be wearing their finest. The militaries are going to be in their uniforms, and it's all to give that great air of pomp. And then, of course, who is brought in last? Paul the prisoner, going to come in last of all. So what was the purpose of all of that pomp?
To show who's boss.
What's that, Patty?
To show who's boss.
To show who's boss. That's pretty much it. The Romans are big on ceremony anyway. I thought again this past week in reflecting on this section that somewhere in the past I did a long in-depth study on the evolution of worship as far as how it's been done from the first century on, etc. And one of the things that really stood out to me in that study was how much of what is done in worship services today and attitudes, etc., stem not from the early church itself, but from the Roman Empire, because I should say but they adopted basically, as the church moved into apostasy, they adopted the practices of the Roman courts and everything. And so that's where all the special dress comes from. So that's why the preacher in so many denominations has a special robe and a collar, and all of those things don't come from the early church. They come from the Roman Empire. And so just a lot of what we would call fanfare and everything. And it just, sorry about that. Just always amazes me once again that God gives us things simple, and then we always want to go in there and mess them up and improve them and build on them and get a long ways away. But all of this is just to impress the might of the Roman Empire on people. That's why the prisoner is brought in last, But it's for those who would be there audience-wise as well, to show them how great Rome is and everything. Basically, how lucky you are supposed to be part of the empire. Gary?
Didn't the Jews actually start that, seeing how they all had special clothing for their...
The priest did, yes. So, what is the irony involved in all of this, Tom?
That
Let me
Paul's
put it
not
a
even there.
different way. What do you think that people like Felix, or Festus rather, and Agrippa, think, how they feel this is being viewed?
They're the special honorees, they're the dignitaries, we're the big shots.
They're the people that history will talk about in their mind, you see. They're big ones, and of course the irony is that Paul is the big historical figure here, and the one that when people look back, you know, is the central figure involved. So they're not quite the VIPs they think they are. What does Festus say he had found concerning Paul?
Nothing worthy of death.
Found him to be innocent. When would it have been nice to hear Festus say that?
Before.
At the official trial, when instead he said, hey, Paul, would you like to go to Jerusalem and be tried by these guys? That was why we saw last week Paul was like, I've been tried before the tribunal twice now, which is where I'm supposed to be tried, and I've been found innocent. Why am I still here? So it's very interesting there. Who does Festus say he has brought Paul before, and why does he say he has brought Paul before him?
His accusers.
It's not what he's saying here now when he was telling about what he'd done in the past, he is.
King Agrippa?
He's saying, I brought him before you, King Agrippa. And why did he do that?
He had he was gonna send him.
Now, Paul's already appealed to Caesar.
This is to show, I think, that Agrippa has a place next to Festus, that he's important enough to...
Not quite. Rocky?
He's fixing to send him to Rome. He's gonna send him as a prisoner, but he hasn't anything to send to Rome saying, hey, here are the charges. I really don't know. I think it's inappropriate to send him to Rome without at least some charge attached to him being a prisoner, you know?
It's really a very humorous scene here when you know the history and know the characters. But Festus is, you know, he put here, and you got to remember, this is on his first week on the job. And, you know, he comes there with visions of starting out so strong and so perfectly, and he's tried so hard to get off on a good foot with the Jews by really not being fair toward Paul. But in doing so, he shot himself in the foot because Paul appealed to Caesar. Since the death penalty was involved, he has to let him go to Caesar as a Roman citizen. That's the law. But he's already really determined what? That he is innocent. And so, what do you think Festus' big concern is right now? He says, I think it would be absurd to do this. Is that what he's really concerned about, is being absurd? Yeah. He just replaced a guy who got in one of these little quagmires here, and now he's going to send a prisoner to him. It's going to boil down to the same stuff, and there are no charges against him. Part of that law, as I said, I won't try the Latin because my Latin is non-existent, but under their laws, part of that law that allowed the Roman citizen to appeal to Caesar, it had to be in English what we would call extraordinary. So now, instead of sending an extraordinary case to Caesar. Festus is going to be guilty of sending a man who's been found innocent 3 times.
Yeah.
You know, and so Festus is now rightfully concerned. His involvement with Agrippa, and I may have this in some of the other questions, but since it all revolves together, his involvement with Agrippa is considered by the Romans, and I emphasize by the Romans, to be an expert on Jewish culture. So that is why Festus is so happy to see him, because this has come down to some issues in their culture that Festus doesn't understand. He didn't know anything about their culture. You know? And now here's the Roman expert, the one whose grandfather and father was king over the Jews and everything. And so he thinks, okay, I can get Festus involved in this. And furthermore, that allows him to attach Agrippa's name to this as well. So that if the case gets to Caesar and Caesar is mad, there's someone to share some blame with. But you can just see Festus going, well, hey, Caesar, he's the Jewish expert. And so there's a lot of maneuvering going on. Let's see. What is verse 27? Let's read that one again. That's the end. For it seems absurd to me in sending a prisoner not to indicate also the charges against him. That is a political lie. Not that he thought it was absurd and he was worried about being absurd. He was worried about getting executed or at least deposed from his position. All right, so 26, we're going to start the trial. F.F. Bruce has a great outline of this, so I did borrow that for you to have a look at. I'm trying in the questions to bring out different elements that may help to see the situation. Agrippa's professionalism, or expertise, I should say, is one of them. But as you can see from this outline, this is a long defense that Paul gets. It's the longest of all of the accounts of his conversion when he talks to Agrippa. Because of that, we're going to see some things that weren't in the other 2 accounts, but of course we peeked ahead to get the full understanding at the time. But I want to get you to thinking about why this is the case. So with that, we'll begin reading the opening. So Agrippa said to Paul, "You have permission to speak for yourself." Then Paul stretched out his hand and made his defense. "I consider myself fortunate that it is before you, King Agrippa, that I am going to make my defense today against all the accusations of the Jews, especially because you are familiar with all the customs and controversies of the Jews. Therefore, I beg you to listen to me patiently." By the way, notice in that last statement, what is Paul setting up? A long defense. He's letting them know right away. Remember when Tertullus spoke, the hired gun lawyer for the Jews, he made it a point to say in his opening that he was going to be extremely brief. Yeah. So Paul's making it a point before them now that this isn't going to be brief. Knowing that, and knowing that as it's recorded, it's still the longest of them, as I said. What does it tell you about the brevity of Scripture? Paul probably went on for 2 hours anyway. And yet you can read this whole chapter, even if it's recorded in length, in 5 minutes. So when we talk about the brevity of the Scriptures and how much God is leaving out and just giving us the things that we need to know rather than all the information there, that is a good example of it, is Paul's defense here. So, who takes over the proceedings? No, who's running the show?
King Agrippa.
King Agrippa is. Whose court are they in?
Festus's.
Festus's. So you see again how Festus is maneuvering here. He's not just calling on Agrippa's expertise. He turned the whole proceeding over there to him. He's saying, this is your show. And so that's why Agrippa starts the chapter out with, "You're permitted to speak." He did not, you'll read some commentators, right, you gotta be careful about those commentators, that talk about Agrippa outranking Festus. That's completely wrong. Festus outranks Agrippa. It's simply that Festus turned it over to him here because of that expertise and because of the political intrigue involved. Is this a trial?
Not really.
Yeah, that's important to recognize. Paul's going to make his longest defense, and it's not even actually a trial. So why does Paul do that?
It's the hearing. Listen to me patiently, please be patient.
What is he trying to gain?
Freedom.
No, it's not a trial.
But you still.
Convert, I think.
He is trying to convert people to Christianity. And most of all, who do you think he would like to convert in this scenario?
Festus and
He would like to convert King Agrippa, because King Agrippa is considered by the Romans to be that expert. If Agrippa becomes a Christian, the Roman Empire is going to take a different view of Christianity than it does as it is now. So Paul, he always wants to convert everybody, of course, but he really wants to convert Agrippa, and so he is going to exert himself in his efforts. This is why I wish we had the whole sermon, because he is going all out, as we say, to convert Agrippa. And you have to realize, too, Paul recognizes he may not convert him, but even if he doesn't convert him, he has clarified the issue with the official that is considered the Roman Empire's expert on the Jews as to what really Christianity is. That's the whole purpose of the chapter, is to establish the relationship that Christianity has with Judaism, and how Judaism is the soul that Christianity comes out of, and Christianity is therefore the fulfillment, just as Jesus said, of Judaism. This keeps the Roman Empire from getting persecution against the church, because it labels it as the outgrowth of Judaism, which is a legal religion, and it marks the distinction in future civil trials with their Jewish expert that this is not about breaking laws that involve life and death penalties and things like that. No.
I think that at this point, King Agrippa sees what he's trying to do in persuading him. Because you find out later on that he even says that. You think you're going to persuade me to be a Christian? Which he might not be able to persuade him, but he's going to affect his heart and how he feels.
Yeah, that's going to be the end of the chapter.
I know, but if we're reading about it now.
Yeah, we're reading the
he knows
beginning.
it already.
Yeah, but, so that's how Agrippa is going to feel at the end of it, not when he just opens up.
Well, I think he knows
Something
now,
said.
though, what Paul's trying to do.
But what has he heard now?
Was he what?
He hasn't heard Paul's defense yet.
No, I mean, after he hears it. I
Yes.
don't think before he knows at the beginning
Okay.
what's going on.
All right. Why does Paul stretch out his hand here?
Get their attention like you did before.
It's not that. That's the only reason I wrote this question. It's because they translate it the exact same way Did you notice that, Monty? That they translate it when speakers are raising their hand to quiet the crowd so that they can speak. That's not what he's doing here. That's not what the Greek says. This is a formal salute. He is recognizing Agrippa's designation as king here, and he gives a formal salute. And for some reason, they translate it the exact same way, so I wrote that question so that we could realize that he has no need. He is in this official hearing. He has no need to quiet a crowd here. There is no buzzing crowd, you see. This is his salute to Agrippa, just showing his respect there. And that's one thing I meant all week to look at, Monty, and never did, but I wanted to see if anybody translated that in a better fashion in English.
Chris, you know, something interesting here is this would have been really a thing to have looked at, because Paul is in chains whenever he is stretching out
his hand to give the salute, yes, very, very much so. What do you think of Paul's opening statement to Agrippa? And that's the I consider myself fortunate part that I'm referring to. Is he trying to flatter Agrippa? He's trying to show the proper respect. That's why it's important to recognize the salute here and everything, and to establish the fact, not just with Agrippa, but with everybody there, that again, Agrippa is this expert on Jewish customs and traditions. So, in other words, he's setting it up, okay, if I convince Agrippa, you should all understand that means you should be convinced as well. So he sets it up. What does he mean by that phrase, customs and contra? This is a very telling phrase. He all uses it as an opening statement.
Well, there's been a lot of riots so far.
Okay.
Just talk about the law and the traditions of the whole
Yeah.
culture.
Customs is the law of Moses, and here Agrippa's going to be familiar with that. But the problem is not the law of Moses. What's the problem? The problem is the controversies. And the controversies are those differences between the political sects. And that's where, of course, the whole meat of the defense lies, and the crux of understanding the conflict amongst the Jews themselves over Christianity. And so he's saying, I know that you are an expert in the law of Moses, but also in the differences. Just like today, you were asked about the differences between the political parties. You know, most of us are familiar with the basic platforms of at least the Republicans and the Democrats and probably the Green Party, you know, things like that. And that is where they're disagreeing in reality. So then in verse 4, he's going to shift toward the meat of his defense here. My manner of life from my youth, spent from the beginning among my own nation and in Jerusalem, is known by all the Jews. They have known for a long time, if they are willing to testify, that according to the strictest party of our religion, I have lived as a Pharisee. And now I stand here on trial because of my hope in the promise made by God to our fathers, to which our 12 tribes hope to obtain. Could this get any more Hebrew?
No.
You see what he's doing with that statement? Everything I'm doing is only because basically I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. Yeah. And so look at all the different ways, even going to refer to the 12 tribes here, to which our 12 tribes hope to obtain as they earnestly worship night and day. And for this hope I am accused by Jews, O king. Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises the dead? That is powerful. So what is he saying about his prior life?
That he was
Number one, he's saying it's an open book. Everybody knows my life story. These people grew up with me. These people watched me ascend to the tops of our religion and become this great persecutor, you know. It's as Jewish as it gets. So why does he say he is on trial? Well, look at his language there. Every word here that he gives is just like reading inspiration, because that's what it really is. And so it's just amazing the wisdom that is contained. There is not a single word wasted in this defense. So he says here in verse 6, I am standing on trial for what?
Promise of our fathers.
The hope or the promise made by God to our fathers. So in other words, I am just doing what every Jew does. This is who we are. And this is the whole reason for our religion. This promise that God has given us. He gave it to the 12 tribes, and we all hope to attain that. And any Jew that earnestly serves God, you see the language, any Jew that earnestly serves God night and day, this is what they're about. So when he talks about that promise, I'm reading here, it says, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, concerning his Son, who was descended from David according to the flesh, and was declared to be the Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord. I threw that in there from the epistle so that you would understand that that promise is specific about the Messiah. So he is saying the whole function of Judaism was to bring this Messiah into the world, and him being raised from the dead is what proves that he is indeed the Messiah. So he's laid a tremendous foundation there. Are you surprised by him referring to the 12 tribes at this point? Well, I wrote that question for no reason, Rocky. A lot of times people will get tripped up there, and so I wrote it. But you have to recognize that, yes, the so-called missing 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, we're going to talk this morning in worship, Lord willing, about the Assyrians and how they destroyed the northern kingdom. But remember, even though the Assyrians carried them away into captivity, they didn't take all of them, and some of them come back through generations. And if you want any proof, you can just go over to the opening of Luke's gospel and see that Anna, the prophetess there in the temple when they bring the baby Jesus, is of one of those 10 tribes. And so she was living in Jerusalem long after those events. But he mainly tugs that 12 tribe string just to be as Jewish as he can be in doing that. What is the emphasis of verse 7b? Let's look at 7b. As the Ernie said, I think we talked about that one already. What do you see in verse 8? What's he doing there? Yeah, he's using very heavy sarcasm here because he's before a Jewish expert who knows about this promise and knows about life after death, blah, blah, blah. And he's saying the Jewish religion is based on the promise of life after death, and I'm on trial by Jews for believing in life after death.
He just told King Agrippa, you're the authority. He said, it shouldn't be an incredible thing with you. You're the authority.
You should be as amazed as I am that any Jew would try and persecute me for believing in the resurrection. That's what he's doing there. So he's going to introduce 3 lines of evidence to prove the correctness of this statement, this doctrine that Judaism became Christianity and that all families of the earth might be blessed. That promise is specifically related to Jesus, the Messiah. So the first line of evidence is the resurrection of Christ that we saw there in verses 4 through 8. The second is coming right up. So let's move into verse 9 and look at that. I myself was convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And I did so in Jerusalem. I not only locked up many of the saints in prison after receiving authority from the chief priests, but when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. And I punished them often in all the synagogues and tried to make them blaspheme. And in raging fury against them, I persecuted them, even to foreign cities. Notice there the cities is plural. Damascus is not the only city that Paul went to do that. He had done that to other cities before Damascus. Damascus is simply where he has his conversion. So what is he doing there in verse 9? Well, that's some great animation, isn't it? What's he doing there in verse 9? So then I thought to myself that I had to do many things hostile to the name of Jesus of Nazareth.
His faith as a Hebrew,
Yeah.
this is a wrong direction.
He's saying, as a Hebrew of Hebrews, I myself at first thought that punishing these followers of this Jesus was the thing to do, and I was as zealous as it gets in doing that. And so all of these really, I don't care too much about the animation because they're all 3 designed just to bring out, to show you that in his second line, what he is establishing is that I once went after this religion with everything I had in all good conscience, thinking that I was serving God, and I did that because I'm a Jew too. Verse 11, I just want to read that one again before we really hit the... I punished them often in all the synagogue, and I tried to force them to blaspheme. So you're talking about torture and everything else here, to try and get Christians to blaspheme. And his mention of his being furiously enraged, I don't think you can have a stronger statement than that. So now he's going to move to another point based off of that. In this connection, I journeyed to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priest. At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, that shone around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. So what does the appearance of Paul's Damascus Road experience for the 3rd time in Acts suggest? It's a little wordy. I could have done better.
It shows it's the beginning of his life teaching Christ.
The 3rd time, though.
The 3 days.
Christians again to bring them back.
Yeah, that's true in all of those. All I'm trying to get you to see here is what a pivotal point in the history of the world Paul's conversion really was. God doesn't like to tell us things more than once. We get this account 3 times, and there's great value in it. For one, for the testimony of the scriptures, because the additional information in each one strengthens the inspiration, because of course if it wasn't written by inspiration and you have something told 3 times, what's the forger gonna do? He's gonna copy it word for word all 3 times so that no one questions that this is the same thing. But of course, that's not what in real life would happen. And there are these 3 occasions, but most of all, we should recognize that outside the crucifixion, it's the conversion of Paul as number 2 in the importance of the history of Christianity.
That's right.
And it amazes me that doesn't get appreciated. But that one thing alone should show it to you. There are 4 either brand new details or intensified details, stronger statements about them in verses 13 and 14 there. They are that light is brighter than the sun. That's an intensity strengthening. That it blazed around everyone. From the other accounts, you could have got the idea that it was only around Saul, but no, it was around everyone. Likewise, therefore, everyone fell to the ground. And then that statement, it is hard for you to kick against the goads. And remember, that's those goads, those sharp pieces of metal or wood that they use to spur the animal on. And if the animal kicked against that while you were doing that, what happened?
Cut them.
You drove it deeper in, so that you're actually damaging yourself. So that's something God tells Paul, you're resisting me, you're only hurting yourself. And then when you think about how Paul laments later about having been a persecutor, chief of sinners, etc. Verse 50, and I said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and a witness to the things in which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles, to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes, so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. Before we go any further, I want to share Galatians 1:15 and 17 here, where Paul writes and says, but when God, who had set me apart even from my mother's womb and called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me so that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult with flesh and blood, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went away to Arabia and returned once more to Damascus. So this is Paul's words about his calling there in Galatians. Look at how it matches up to some of the other, and remember these are Old Testament ones, which is why I'm using them here for you to see that those Jews and Herod would relate to the language Paul is using. So the words of the risen Jesus calling Paul to his mission recalls the commissioning of the prophets Ezekiel and Jeremiah. Stand up on your feet and I will speak to you. I am sending you to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against you. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. So it's important to recognize at this point, now hey, we got to quit here, so let this one sink deep so we can start on the next one next week. It's important to recognize that Paul is showing that in the history of the Jews, when God's message, when his prophecy comes to an individual Jew like that, this is what they have to do. They have to stand up and go on that mission and proclaim what God tells them. And here are these Jews here, and you know, my story is just the same as Jeremiah and Ezekiel. I've only done, in other words, he's saying what any good Jew would have done in following Christ, because I got this message. All right, I appreciate your attention this morning. Lord willing, we'll take it up there next week.